Hello, a few months ago, maybe like 9 months ago, I created this jelly plate placement tool using a Dollar Tree easel. But I found that people do ask me how I made this, and I don't know if those are readily available anymore. So I did go back to Dollar Tree to see if there were other options that could be used. So I came across this little frame artwork piece, and I was trying to find something that was fairly thin. So you can see from the art easel legs, it's fairly thin and it measures about the same height, I guess, of the jelly plate. So when I put it up next to the jelly plate, it's kind of pretty even. Might stand up just a little bit more than the jelly plate, but I was looking for something that was similar. So this frame was a little bit thinner than the first frame I had looked at, so I wanted to give it a try and see if it wasn't as thin as my art easel would, if it would still work. So I just went to work deconstructing the canvas from the frame. Now the staples they used were actually pretty durable and held the frame in place pretty well. I wasn't able to pull those staples up with my pliers, not without maybe hurting myself. So after trying it and struggling a little bit, I decided to get my craft knife and just kind of cut along the staple lines and see if I could kind of cut out the area where the staple is. Again, my goal is just to get one corner, one elbow of this frame removed from the staples and the canvas, and then that way I can start creating the frame part for the placement tool. One warning, I would suggest doing this on a craft mat. At some point I realized I wasn't on a craft mat and I was working with a craft knife, so I did move over to using it on a glass mat, which can handle my craft knife if it lands on it. I also brought out my scissors. These are my really heavy-duty Tim Holtz scissors. Again, just trying to get that canvas off of the frame. I'm working on the back side here. I decided it wasn't going to be a big deal to me if those staples remained on the back side. The part that I was going to be using was going to be the front. I actually tried not to destroy the little canvas because I thought I might be able to use that in a different project. So at this point I had most of the canvas removed and I was able to just kind of break apart the frame. It is made out of, this particular frame is made out of particle board, not wood. And you can see it started splitting just a little bit, and I was thinking of hot gluing that together, but for the test of this video, I didn't glue it together. But if I find that it is falling apart or separating too much, I may do some hot glue to hold that in place, or maybe some other kind of glue. But for now, I'm going to work on making my lines. So you can see on my previous jelly plate placement tool, I had drawn these lines on it. And the reason why is because if you line your paper up to the edge of this placement tool, it's not going to be centered, and your paper probably won't even fit. It'll be sticking off of the jelly plate a little bit. So in order to make it so that it's more centered on the jelly plate, I had to draw these lines, and then that would make it so that it would line up better. So I'm starting with just a black marker, permanent marker, and a kind of like an elbow ruler that I had gotten from Dollar Tree. I am using my previous placement tool as a guide for how big I had made, or how thick I had made those lines is about 1/4 of an inch. So I just lined my ruler up on my new placement tool and just made my lines. The nice thing about having this angled ruler or ruler with an elbow to it is I could line it up on both the top and the side piece and draw my line kind of simultaneously without worrying about it being crooked, because I was able to line all my little dots up and then just draw my lines. Now that I have my lines on my placement tool, it's time to try it out and give it a test. Starting with my 5x7 gel plate. This is the one I probably use most often. So typically I use my placement tool for 2 reasons. The reason I'm going to use it in this example is just to try to get my design centered on my paper without it being offset to one side or another too much. It's kind of hard to eyeball it, especially if you use a thicker paper. It's a lot harder to eyeball where you're centered on the gel plate. And I've had it happen where I didn't use the placement tool, and by the time you get it to stick, you can't really pull it back up and reposition it. So I have had like part of my design not even make it onto my paper and it's all crooked. So this is my main reason that I wanted to create a placement tool in the first place. So that's kind of what I'm showing you in this example. It's not really lining it up a second time, but I will show an example of that later on. But for this particular example, it's just seeing if I can line up this using this placement tool and get the center of my paper. So this is just a 5.5 by 8.5 piece of cardstock, basically an 8.5 by 11 cut in half. And that placement tool is a little bit higher than my previous placement tool. So what I did was I just lined it up and quickly removed it, and then I pressed down all around. The trick is you can't leave your placement tool sitting there while you're pressing down, or else it won't capture all of the sides. So this was a little bit off center here. You can see it's thicker on one side than it is on the other, so that's okay. I just needed to make a minor adjustment to only one side where my line was. It just had to come in a little bit, so I created a second line. And now we're going to do a test to see if that second line makes it so that it's nice and centered. That's the goal that I'm going for. All right, so let's give this one a test. Again, I'm just making sure it's lined up nicely. I have another 8.5 by 5.5 piece of copy paper. And I'm lining it up with the more interior line and just checking to see if this is going to make it more centered. I didn't change the top line because the top and the bottom, there's plenty of space. So that one, you could decide, you could go all the way to the top and not even make the line if you wanted it a little more centered on your actual page. For me, I was more concerned with the centering of the sides. So this one came out a lot more centered. I feel like this was a success for this size paper on the 5 by 7 gel plate. So I like how that turned out, and I think it worked well. Again, you just have to remove that placement tool before so that you could press down evenly on all 4 sides of the plate. So now I'm going to test it on my 8 by 10 gel plate, and I'm just going to use this golden blue fluid paint, a nice pretty bright blue color. And I had found this really cool leaf. It was very large, and I know it's not even fall right now, but I found it outside. It's still kind of soft, so a little bit the design on this one was really unique to me, so I wanted to make a print of this. And this is a good example of how you might need to use a placement tool to line your paper up a couple of times in the same spot. So for this version of it, I've seen this done several ways when you're kind of gel plate printing with leaves or foliage. So for this one, I just pressed down just to get some of that design on my gel plate, and basically I'm removing the paint and leaving the veins behind. So this is what I came up with. There's paint you can see on the leaf, and for this part, while the paint is still wet, I'm going to line up my piece of paper, and now I'm just using an 8.5 by 11 piece of my copy paper. I am lining it up on the interior line, but again, this is a larger piece of paper, and that was my top part of my paper. So that one I could have gone into that middle line a little more. So it's just about testing it out and experimenting and seeing what works. But because I did go into that interior line, if I line it up again, I will have to use that same line to line it up. So I'm going to set that aside, and now I'm going to create another layer. Obviously, I don't want to cover up that entire design, so I'm going back in with these shimmer metallic paints. They are a little bit more of a transparent paint when they're rolled out nice and thin. So this is just going to give another design element over my leaf picture. I'm going to use some more of that orange packaging. This stuff looks really cool. It kind of wrinkles, and it looks really neat when you brayer it away. Although it did catch on my brayer, so I'd had to be careful about that. Now while this is still wet, I'm going to line up, use my placement tool again, the exact same way I had it before, and then use that to line up my piece of paper. Again, I'm going to the inside line on the left side there. And then you just press down evenly. And I do let that dry just a few minutes before I remove it. And here you can see the sides, they look like they lined up nicely. So this is another option for a placement tool if you are looking for something to line up your prints on your Gelli plate. You could buy one at Gelli Arts, but you're going to be paying anywhere from $25 to $50 for one of the ones that they make. They usually make them out of plastic, I think, and they maybe have the same height as a Gelli plate. So some advantages, but for the cost, and some of you living overseas, it may not be ideal for you to be able to purchase one. These are two ways that you could make a placement tool yourself. I will link the video for the placement tool that I had made previously with the art easel, just in case you can find something like that, or with some thin wood pieces. And then there's this frame, if you could find a frame that has a pretty good size to it that you could work with. So this is the 5x7 one that worked out real nice centered, and then the 8x10, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and that one centered nicely on there. So I feel like this was a success, and I feel like this is something that can be repeated. Other people could make this themselves, and you could even personalize it. You could paint it, make it look cute, or do something more fun. You could even make your lines with like washi tape or something. That would be a little more decorative. So however you use it, if you plan to make one, let me know in the comments if you would change anything about this, or if you would try something different, maybe something I hadn't thought about. So thanks for watching, and I hope you give it a try. I'll see you in my next video. Happy crafting.